It's that time, kids.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back.
We are back.
Whether you wanted it or not.
That's exactly right. I don't know if it's by popular demand or not, but we are here. So you're going to have to
Yeah,
deal with that.
I guess.
We are back, another episode of the Fire and Ice series. It's never not funny, at least the two of us.
At
So
least.
sitting next to me on screen is my friend Lauren Rosen, licensed therapist out of California, all around a good person. So welcome, Lauren.
Well, thank you. And to which side is it on the screen? Left?
I
You're on
guess
my, oh,
no,
I
I'm on the
know.
left side of the screen. Doesn't
You
matter.
are on the left side of the screen. So to my left is Drew Linsalata. He's an all-around fabulous guy. He's got a podcast called The Anxious Truth. He's on Instagram as the.anxious.truth. He's got books too, and he's studying to become a therapist. So
Yeah,
watch out, world.
we got stuff, man. We got stuff going on.
Yeah,
So
you're gonna take over. I'm excited.
yeah, it's all in the works, man. It's the grand plan. So wow. As I stumble toward the end of this. Let me turn off my notifications. I'm sorry, people. That was a sound you didn't really necessarily need to hear.
I liked it.
Yeah, that's okay. That's a WhatsApp notification. So today, as is our custom, we figured out a topic about 2.5 seconds before we hit the record button. And so I wrote this morning in my morning newsletter about guilt and forgiving yourself and that sort of stuff. It was a holdover from another episode that I had done of the morning podcast. And a bunch of people really kind of keyed in on that. And then in my live stream today, somebody said, yeah, but what about when the thoughts are about something real, like an actual real event? I said, okay, guilt and real event OCD.
Here we are.
So here, yeah, we're going to talk about that today. And I think the two, I'm guessing that clinically the two are not really connected. Are they connected?
Wait, the guilt and real event OCD?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I actually so with OCD, we see, and I'm sure you see this too. People come in and they often have anxiety as the main emotional component. But sometimes it's disgust and sometimes it's guilt. In fact, we see a lot of guilt. And when it comes to real event OCD, obviously this is anecdotal, but I do see them overlapping quite a bit. And oftentimes it's related to some degree of moral scrupulosity.
Mhm.
So I did something in the past. And what if that means that I'm a bad person, that I am unforgivable? So, I mean, you can see where it dovetails beautifully into feelings of guilt.
That makes sense. I guess there's regret in there too.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
I wrote this morning about the difference between regret and guilt because I think there is a difference in my opinion, anyway. Um,
Mm.
and so I guess there's got to be regret. There's guilt, all tied in. Then they are related.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what, like, I maybe in brief, because I know you've already put out stuff on this, but what is the differentiation that you make between regret and guilt?
To me, regret, and this is the way I conceptualize it for me, is that regret is an acknowledgement that I would like to be able to change something in the past. I can
Mm,
acknowledge that there's something that I do not like in the past.
mm,
Guilt is sort of a never ending cycle of trying to change it or find some sort of absolution through like self flagellation. Like,
mm,
I will continue to beat myself up over this in the hopes that somehow that will resolve it or bring me
mm.
peace or get me some absolution in some real or metaphysical sense. I don't know.
Yeah, almost like what's it in the Catholic Church? I should know this. I was
You and me both.
raised in the Catholic Church, and I have no clue. But there, the idea of atoning, there it is, like atonement. Not that it's exclusive to the Catholic faith, but that's certainly an idea that you're going to do a certain number of Hail Marys, or you're going to pray the Rosary a certain number of times, and then you're free, right? And I think that idea is one that really drives a lot of people with, and it doesn't have to be related to real event OCD, but around this concept of guilt. Like, you're going to get somewhere by just reliving over and over again how much you dislike a situation. And I think one other important discrepancy to make is, you talk about regret versus guilt, and it sort of reminds me of the flavor of the difference that's talked about between guilt and shame. And certainly that's something that comes up in the context of real event OCD and of moral scrupulosity is, what if I'm bad, right? The difference between guilt and shame being guilt means I've done something
Mhm.
bad that I, would have done otherwise. If I had it back to, I could relive it versus shame, which is I am bad.
Oh, that's good. Had not heard that before.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I don't know who it's necessarily originally from, but Brene Brown talks about it a lot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so all of that mess is involved when it comes to real event OCD.
Mm.
Do you see a fair amount of real event OCD in your community?
There's some, I'm pretty sure. I mean, clearly you can't diagnose anybody on the internet, but
Sure.
you could find the people who will tell you that they can't seem to get past being anxious all the time because this is a real thing. This either really happened in the past, or it's a real problem now, or a pending problem in real life that demands that they stay in this anxious, hypervigilant,
Mm,
constantly thinking, constantly problem solving, state. And
sure.
oftentimes people will almost offer that as not an excuse because they don't want to be that way, of course, but as almost a justification for why.
Yes.
Oh, no, no, no. But this is different. My anxiety is different. It's because of this. So therefore it's real and different.
Yes. Which we just talked about this in the last episode together of like how the idea of like this is different, and it's no different with real event OCD or with the generalized anxiety that you're talking about, right? But this is a concern that makes sense given,
Mhm.
and is likely or at least potential. It's not quite as far fetched as maybe some of the concerns that we see in more stereotypical OCD. And so it's warranted. I'd be, I'd be irresponsible to drop it, or I'd be bad to drop it, right? Like that means something about the degree to which I care about what I did.
Yeah. I love the irresponsible thing. That's such a common theme too. It feels so irresponsible for me
Hmm.
to do what you suggest that I should do. Like, yeah, it's gonna, you feel like you're being very reckless if you don't tend to this problem.
Right.
That seems to justify tending to constantly during every waking
Yeah.
moment. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
real event OCD, is it, I mean, does that specify this is an event that has passed already? Or are we talking about in the past, or does it matter?
Usually people are talking about a past real event that they are, and that's just in my experience of it. I've not heard it as, oh, well, there's something in the future that we're trying to prep for that's a real event. Though these categories are all arbitrary. And I think, again, OCD, generalized anxiety, they're all together on a spectrum. And so whether it's about something in the past or something in the future, it's all the same process that people are going through of trying to make sure something bad isn't going to come to pass or isn't true of historically. I think with real event OCD, because it's usually based in the past, it's generally about like how do I resolve this, kind of like what you were saying before, how do I make space for this to be part of my life. So I think that there's a lot of work in accepting dialectics in in that realm. People with OCD, people with anxiety disorders tend to be very, very black and white, as you know all too well.
Yeah.
And when that happens, there's a sense of I'm either good or I'm bad,
Yes.
which, I don't know about you. I'd be curious to know actually. From my vantage point, good and people usually, most people are not good or bad.
Oh, no, I would agree with that. 100%. You're not either good or bad. Or
Right.
sometimes you're better, sometimes I mean, but there really is, this is a little more philosophy than anything else now. Like, what is good, what is bad? We can kind
Right.
of agree sometimes societally on universal good and bad, but that's a pretty narrow range of things. Everything else exists in the gray.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
You're so right. Like so many things are in the gray. So many things don't neatly fit into these categories. And even if something is good or bad, if we can all agree on that, at what point does a person then inherently become bad? At what point do they become irredeemable?
Mhm. Which I guess is a common concern. Like, this makes me unlovable, unforgivable, unacceptable,
Mm.
unredeemable. Yeah.
Well, it
That
goes
black
back
and white
to
thing. Yeah.
go. What
No, I was
would
gonna say the black and white thing is I am either good or bad, or this is either completely solved and put to bed, or it is a disaster. There's no
yes,
middle ground of like, well, I may never find resolution, or I've partially resolved this, or I'm okay with some of it. That
yes,
there's no tolerance for that middle ground in these
no,
situations. Yeah.
no. Don't like things to be like just sort of like laying out there in the ether unresolved.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
Gross.
and I would imagine that's a threat. That unresolved uncertainty is a threat.
Yeah. And I can't help but wonder sometimes with real event OCD how much it is about one day this is gonna somebody's gonna call me on this. I'm not gonna be prepared. I won't have atoned properly. Like I won't have kept at this, and then I'll realize that I should have been doing that sort
Yeah.
of self-flagellation all along, and that I really was a bad person. I was gonna say too, I think it also relates to Aaron Beck and negative core beliefs and this idea of, there's worthlessness, helplessness, and unlovability are those three core, and that like that unlovable, that if you really knew who I was,
Yeah.
then you would never accept me. Um, it drives us. So um, I think most humans, to some degree, that there's this concern about being accepted and loved, but then taken to an extreme in cases like with real event OCD or anxiety about real
Yeah.
events.
Real events, whether they're current, future, or in the past, I guess.
Yeah,
You said something before like this exists on a continuum, which is what I was wondering about. Is it at some point, and I get this question quite often too, like, well, I can't stop thinking about this. Does that mean I have OCD? Does that mean do I have real event OCD because I can't stop thinking about this thing that happened, or I can't stop? When do we
I,
know?
I don't know that it's that simple. I think again, talk about black and white. We like to have these lovely little categories where everyone gets placed, and there's the DSM, and okay, you fit in the box, and then we do this. But honestly, most anxiety, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters whether we call it OCD or generalized anxiety disorder or health anxiety or well, illness anxiety disorder or social anxiety disorder or a phobia or agoraphobia or oh my gosh, panic disorder,
Mhm.
you name it. Like those things, they're all the same from my vantage point anyway. The treatment is identical. We're just talking about different themes, and you see so much overlap that I don't know what the benefit is of differentiating so much other than that it's normalizing to people in the very same way that all the subtypes within OCD are very normalizing to people, but they're not particularly relevant. That's, you know, my
Yeah,
take on it.
that does make sense. I think it's excuse me, especially if the subject, if the content, which I know we don't normally care about, but if the content is sort of taboo or on the edges, normalizing that could be really important.
Totally.
On the flip side,
Absolutely.
for somebody who will call themselves an overthinker and I can't get over this and I just carry this guilt, sometimes there's a fear that, oh, I have OCD. Uh-oh. I
Mm,
have another label, another diagnosis, something else is broken. So
yeah.
there's some fear there too. But I like how you said in the end, the treatment is really, it comes down to the same in the end.
Yeah.
The context might be different, the intentional triggers might be a little different, the methods might be different based on the context, but in the end, the principles are the same. So it doesn't,
Totally.
yeah,
And so what does it matter if, to your point earlier, you're worried about a work event that's coming up in a month and you have to speak in front of people and that terrifies you. So maybe you have like specific situation social phobia or social anxiety disorder,
Mhm.
or you're ruminating over and over again about some moment in the past where you said something and you're not sure whether or not it was right, or whether or not it was taken out of context, or people hate you and you're a bad person, right? And then you can also see the flavors of social anxiety in there. So it's you know
Yeah, yeah,
and I think this goes beyond disorders too, what we're talking about, because I mean, I'll share a personal anecdote, if
okay,
I may.
sure, bring it.
um So, as you know, but our watchers do not, I recently had back surgery. And I think what I noticed, and obviously I have an anxiety disorder, I'm very open about it, but so I guess I'm not necessarily the best test case, but my anxiety disorder is pretty well managed on the whole. But one thing that I noticed in the aftermath of the surgery, or in the aftermath really of the diagnosis and the understanding that I required surgery, was I should have done X. If only I had, right? And so, and you can see the similarity between what we've been talking about, like anxiety about what's going to happen in the future, what, like something that I did in the past that's like a maybe more often than not an event or a concrete thing, and saying, well, hey, I didn't go to the doctor sooner, and I didn't do this, and what if it's my fault, right? And that impulse to beat up on yourself, it's been there for me in moments, and I've had to be like, oh wow, look at that bait, that's interesting, thanks so much. And do my best not to go down that rabbit hole, because, and I could go through all of the rational reasons why it doesn't make sense to go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, I think just hopefully that's illustrative of how this is beyond diagnostic categories.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody at some point suffers through these things. Guilt,
Totally.
regret, rumination, overthinking, that thing that you just can't. I mean, look, and we all have those. I have I have things from back in my high school years. I have one incident in particular, and I'm not gonna I can't really share because I need to protect the privacy of certain people, but
Yeah.
it's not anything horrible. But in the end, it was really awkward. And I
Mhm.
know that, boy, I did something when I was 16 that I would have never done when I was 22 or 32 or 52. Like, I would have known better. Um,
Totally.
and it was a stupid thing to do. And every once in a while, I will remember it for whatever
Mhm.
reason. I don't know why. It'll pop back up and like, hey, remember when you did that thing? And I'm like, yes, I freaking remember. And there is that feeling of embarrassment. Like, it's really, and it's funny. It's
Oh,
the embarrassment that I didn't feel then because I didn't know I was wrong then.
yeah.
Did, but now I know. So I'm embarrassed for 16-year-old me. So
Oh,
everybody in the world, I like, it wasn't disastrous, but nonetheless, it was impactful. And I think everybody, all human beings, will have that situation. It
totally.
happens to all of us. But at some point, maybe it starts to go off the rails a little.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And it's the difference between, and by the way, I was just awing for little Drew. I mean, little 16-year-old Drew.
16-year-old me. Hey, I thought I had it going on at 16, man.
Man, I didn't, but I look back and I'm still like, ooh, poor thing.
I,
Man, that's a
yeah.
rough age to be.
Oh, I thought I was the shit, but what a dork. Like, I could say that now. Like, 16-year-old, he was a dork, but that's it.
Oh, the best.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I think you're right. Everybody has these moments of recollection, these sparks of memory. And I have some like that too, where it's like, ooh, right? You get that
Yeah.
feeling. And I think that is the feeling that is the sort of invitation in for people with real event OCD. I don't want that, and I have to fix that. I can't
Yeah.
have, because it's inconsistent with my self-image. Like, that doesn't fit with the rest of who I am and my idea of myself. Um, and so, I know we're kind of going outside the context of traditional ERP approaches, but it is in the realm of all or none thinking, and restructuring in a way, because it's really down to making space for the fact that, back what we were talking about before, that we are both good and bad,
Mhm.
that there are things that we will never quite be able to right, that we have these stains on our good names, and that some people are going to see us as the villain in their stories, which, I don't know a lot of people who like that anyway, but certainly if you have any sort of social anxiety, that's like, no.
Yeah, but I think it's an unavoidable fact of life for almost everybody.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna have a problem with something you did at some point and will hold a grudge, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I know is not a pleasant place to be for a lot of people. But I think what's interesting is when you say that's the invitation in. So for somebody who's prone to this problem where it catches fire and then the cycle starts,
Yeah.
that creates, it's a state of distress. Clearly, I experience emotions and embarrassment and shame and, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And it's that
Yeah.
icky feeling.
Yeah.
But the icky feeling is a state of distress. And if you live in a world where you cannot allow a state of distress, you are going to quickly try to solve that problem, an
Mhm.
unsolvable problem, to make sure that, "Ugh, I cannot allow that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's such a good point. Sorry, go ahead.
No, whether it's just the feeling that those emotions will be too much, the two things I hear is the one that you
Mm,
were talking about. What does this say about me? It is a
mm,
judgment about me. I am a bad person. I'm a horrible person. I'm unlovable. Or big emotions are too much. I cannot
mm,
handle big emotions. So got to figure this out and stop it.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like the idea, one of the core fears in the realm of OCD that's talked about is this idea of ruining, right? Like, and I think the idea that so this is a little bit different from what you were just talking about with it being like, this is too much. I can't possibly feel this when it
Mhm.
comes up. But this idea that like, and now I've ruined my life. And
Mhm.
now it's permanently marked and there's just no way of getting back to where I was, and it's going to all be horrible. um, which I think is sort of related in a way to what you
Yeah.
were just talking about.
And I think everybody probably has that feeling as well. It's just a matter of degree sometimes.
Mhm.
Everybody's going to have that feeling. I can't change that. As much as I wish I had done this differently, I can't do it differently now. So it's not perfect the way I wanted this to turn out.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a matter of how willing are we to tolerate that in the end.
Yes, it is absolutely it. Can we let that just sort of hang out with us? One thing I liked that you said maybe a couple minutes ago was that the idea of this is a problem that can't be resolved.
No.
And I think a lot of OCD and anxiety falls into that category, but in some instances, it's particularly clear that there's no certainty to be had or no resolution to be had. And I think this is certainly one of those cases. If something has happened that you have guilt around or shame around, like you cannot change the event. That's not possible. And no amount of going back through it and trying to rationalize and reason with yourself as to why you're allowed to forgive yourself is actually going to change the event. And spoiler alert, you're not actually going to talk yourself into feeling as though you deserve to be forgiven.
No, never. It's not going to happen.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, no matter how hard you think. I will share a quick anecdote of somebody who took it to such an extreme, and this person has spoken publicly about it. So I think
Mm.
I'm okay saying this without saying a name. Took
Yeah.
it to such an extreme that they started digging into the other worlds, the many worlds theories in quantum
Oh,
physics
yeah, yeah,
to try and find solace in the idea that in other parallel universes where the
yeah.
quantum waveform collapsed differently, that event did not happen and it did not ruin them. And they are thought of as a great person instead of the villain in someone's story. They
Oh,
really, and they dug into that. Is that true? Is that actually true? Have we proved that that's true? It became
wow.
an obsession to prove that the many worlds theory is true. So they knew that in some version of the universe that didn't happen. That's how
Wow.
that can go off the rails.
Yeah. Oh, and but it does sort of also speak to the element of what beautiful minds we have, right? Like that you can
Amazing.
that is the connection that's drawn there, the ideas, the creativity behind that. If I could just resolve it, but by proving this theory, you know, um, not a lot of people would come to that. I don't think.
Yeah, that's incredibly creative thinking. But
Totally.
that's, to me, a great example of how we bring, and this is a thing that comes out of ACT and acceptance and commitment therapy, where we pathologize problems and we think that life is a series of problems that need to be solved, and we bring to bear this incredible power that
Mm,
isn't meant for that,
right.
and it becomes a weapon instead of a tool. Like that's incredibly creative thinking and a lot of connections, and it's amazing testament
Yeah.
to the human mind. But then it becomes a weapon against yourself when you try to look at life as a series of problems to be solved, which it is not.
Right. And that's where the idea, not to go too off the beaten track here, but that's where the idea of the obsessive mind came from, right? Is like, how do you operate the obsessive mind? It's not changing and it's not bad, but any tool set or skill set that is universally applied isn't going to be effective in all instances. That's going to start to become problematic. So if you have the operating manual and you know where your strengths and weaknesses are, and you can kind of deal when you get hooked and you want to go into problem solving mode, then you get to appreciate the parts of your brain that are extraordinary.
Yeah. if you're not tortured by them. And I hate to use the word tortured, but that's what people, I'm just tortured by this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So I guess let's leave last 5 minutes to probably answer the question everybody's been waiting for. Well, then what am I supposed to do with this? How do I overcome this? I can't stop thinking about this. I can't stop trying to solve the problem. What do I do?
Mm,
Because I know they're going to ask, what do I do? How do I overcome that? How do I just stop thinking about this?
mm.
Yeah.
Well, and you've already answered it, haven't you? I think.
Well, you can't just stop thinking about it. That's the first like technical answer. Like
Yes.
a man to never think about it again will guarantee that you will think about it. We just know that now. That's just the way it
It's so
goes.
cruel. It's so cruel.
It's bad. It's a bad design. It's a good design, but it's a bad design. It is. Sorry. Bad design. Can I tell you?
There are some flaws in the design for sure,
Yeah.
and that is one of them. Yeah, so we know that trying not to think about it is not going to be an effective option for sure, and so it's down to how do we make space to live alongside the thoughts without necessarily picking them up
Mhm.
and futzing with them, right? Like, can you just let the sort of internal clutter of your mind be there instead of like, nope, I need to make sure that everything goes back in its place. And then of course things don't have a place and it's it's a
Yeah.
mess.
And so in the end, the alleviate because everybody's after the alleviation of the discomfort. Like I want to get out of that state of distress that this triggers. And in the end, it's going through the state of distress. That's the only way to do it. And I think sometimes when people ask the question, but how do I overcome this? It's an incredulity. Like, wait a minute, you can't possibly mean that I have to simply allow myself to feel like an awful person.
Mhm.
Well, but sadly, yeah, you kind of do. Like,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. I
yeah.
mean, the only addition I will make, because people will say, like, am I supposed to feel like a horrible person forever?
Oh,
I'm like, no, and I'm not saying you, but
no,
you know what I mean? But
right.
people then I go, well, that's like a horrible person is not a feeling, it's a judgment. So what are you actually feeling? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling guilty? Are you feeling um whatever? And then that's something that we can work with because I can help you sit with that. I can also help you acknowledge and sit with the fact that that thought is over there. Um, but if it's I have to sit with this fact that I'm a or the idea that I'm a horrible person, we're almost feeding into it being some sort of a truth.
Yeah. So that means that's a really good. I'm glad you brought that up. Oh, that means I just have to be horrible forever? No, but you have to be willing to allow the possibility that you are in fact horrible. And
Yes.
because when you try to run from that, it's like quicksand, which I
Yeah.
thought would be I know this is an old joke, but I thought it would be a much larger problem in the world based on what I saw as a kid. And it turns out I've never encountered quicksand, but it's like quicksand. The more you struggle, the more you sink. And
Yep.
so the more you try to get away from that state of distress, the more you are glued to it. But when you stop and allow it to be there, you get to actually, it sits in a chair next to you and you can push the chair away. It's on casters a little bit and make space and like,
Yeah.
okay, I can coexist with this. And then it doesn't feel like it's going to be forever.
Right, because then you get to have the natural ebb and flow of it where it
I,
comes sometimes and then you're taken off guard by it and you're like, oh right, there that thing happened. Oh,
yeah.
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 Okay. Well,
Well, so I
yeah.
mean, unfortunately, we haven't given you. If you're watching and you're hoping we were going to give you these are 3 steps. Here are 3 hacks to like overcome relationship. REOCD. Sorry, like we're never going to do that video.
No, I was gonna say, I think all of our videos will be a disappointment to the person who's looking for that.
Kind of.
Uh, but I think that there's also a really beautiful silver lining here, which is that you walk out of it uh, going, okay, like it's none of life is that simple. None of it. So I could either fight for these categories of good and bad and, right and wrong, or I could just make space for the fact that like life is a freaking mess and that's uncomfortable. That is definitely uncomfortable not
Yeah.
having that sort of organization around it all.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. But the other thing too is the realization that life is a hot mess for everybody. That's
Mhm.
another ACT principle there that like suffering in air quotes or adversity is a universal experience for human beings. Like,
Totally.
yeah, we don't get a choice. That's what we're in. So
Yep.
trying to make sure it never happens is really a sure way to suffer even more. So,
I have a quote by Ricky Gervais that I'll have to share with you that sort of talks about the idea that it's all like all of us are in it and this sort of suffering. Hold on, actually, can I share?
Yeah, hell yeah, sure you
I
can.
have it really quite readily available.
It must be a good quote. That's the
Actually,
only.
there are two. I was sharing it. A friend told me about it. I found one, and his are sort of like, well, because we Ricky Gervais is a little bit, salty. So one of them is saltier than the other.
Bring it.
But the one I found, the first one was, I believe that life is like a holiday, I guess. We don't exist for like a 13.5 billion years. And then we have 80 to 90 years, which is an amazing experience. Consciousness, fun, wine, dogs, cats, all the amazing things in life. Then we die and we never exist again. Now, some people don't believe that, even though I think that that's all we've got. I still think that the quality of life is what matters. And I think we have a lot of responsibility. We have to pay our way and enjoy ourselves without hurting other people. And I think to leave the world even just a little better. If you stay in someone's caravan or apartment, everyone knows that you should leave it as you found it or a little bit better. Leave it just a little bit better. And I want to be in the balance. I want to leave my corner of the world as nice as I found it, if not a little bit better. That is all. And I think that the idea of, we get 80 to 90 years, and, I think I wanted to bring it up because it's like, and it's going to be full of really hard things, which he's talking about the fun and the wine and the dogs and the cats. But it's he implied here is that you're going to be on a roller coaster and you get to enjoy it or not. The other one is we are on a rock traveling around one of 100 billion stars. Our species is one of over 500 million that have ever existed. Our chances of being born are about 1 in 400 trillion. You're not special, but you are lucky. Enjoy your amazing life. You'll never exist again.
I really like that one. That one's really good.
Well, it's got his like true pithy sort of
Yeah. No,
character.
that's actually really good. Your odds of being here are astronomically against. So
Yeah. So
let's be thankful that we're here, I guess. I know easier said than done. One of the things I dig about the first quote too is there's some philosophy in there. And so leave the world at least as good as the way you found it. And in a way, we get to contribute. So this conversation, people are going to listen to us. They might talk to somebody else. And navigating through the shit and the uncertainty and the distress, believe it or not, we're sort of adding to the collective wisdom, the collective knowledge. People that come after us will stand on our shoulders and know that one day Lauren sat in her big black chair and said, you got to surf through the shit. And somebody will benefit from that. So we are all contributing in a way.
yeah.
There's a point to a certain extent in the struggle. I don't want to romanticize it, but there's also silver linings in it.
No, actually, I love that, and I think that that's the benefit of having gone through what we've been through and coming here to try and support others. And yeah, you make with what you're given what you can.
Yeah.
And it's not to sugarcoat it. And yeah, obviously you're gonna have moments where it's like, yeah, but I didn't leave my corner of the world better off, and I'm bad, and therefore I deserve to punish myself unendingly for the next however many years. Um, but what's interesting is you could do that, or maybe you spend your life just trying to be the kind of person that you want to be.
Yeah, that works. And sometimes you make it and sometimes you don't. Some
Yeah,
days you're really good at being you and some days we suck at being us. It's okay.
yeah,
It's all allowed. It's all part of the deal.
it is.
All right. So there you go. We've solved no problem for anybody, but no, honestly though, hopefully it's been a fruitful discussion to listen into and maybe you'll take something out of it and have things to think about, even though thinking sometimes is the problem, things to reflect on. Let's say that.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
yeah,
like
I
that.
always appreciate these chats that we have.
Likewise.
Yeah, we will keep doing them. So I guess we're done. We've gone a little further than we usually do at 34 minutes. So good. But for those of you who do not follow Lauren on social media, you totally should. And I got it right. I didn't have to think about it. There she is
So
at
smart.
the obsessive mind on Instagram is probably the best place. And also
Yep.
your website, theobsessivemind.com, right?
I think I'm gonna get a little bit more into the YouTube world, maybe.
All right. Come on in. The water's fine. We got
And
cookies.
is Drew, and he's got a thing that he's going to put up, and that's his handle on Instagram. You can find him there or on many other places. His website, which also your podcast is on your website, or do you have a
Yeah.
different? Yeah.
No, they're all there.
And
TheAnxiousTruth.com.
then theanxioustruth.com. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, all over
Thanks.
Amazon too, with all his books and stuff. Like just, crushing life,
I am
Drew and
all over
Franke.
Amazon. Thank
Yeah.
you, my friend. Okay. Well, if you're watching with us live on YouTube like we do, thanks for hanging out with us for sure. And keep commenting. We'll try and answer them the best we can. If you're watching in the future, leave a new comment. We'll try and answer the best we can. So thanks a bunch.
Yep. Thanks.
All right, we're out.